Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go over how we make an email inside our hosting control panel. You go to the email menu item and come down to mailboxes. In our mailboxes, you'll see you have a listing of mailboxes that are already created. We're using the Rack Real Life domain for this, so you can see we actually have some email addresses already created. Um, for this demonstration of how to create an email, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a student at rackreallife.com email address. So it's as easy as coming up here and clicking on create new email account. In this box, of course, you just want the name. In our case, for this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and put student. That's the name that we want for the email address. And then on the other side, we want to go ahead and we want to select whether we want it on one of our subdomains or on our primary domain. I would recommend, whenever possible, just go ahead and create it on your primary domain unless you actually are setting up a really good website for in a subdomain. So at this point, we'll take Rack Real Life. You go ahead, you put your password in, and then you repeat your password. And then you have these two options. The first one is forward. Forward is if you create an email address, such as maybe like info@yourdomain.com, and you want people to be able to fill out a form and submit it to info@yourdomain.com, but you don't want to have to check or set up that email on any of your mail clients. You don't want to have to come back in here to check it all the time and stay on top of it. What you can do is you could go ahead and you could forward it to another email address, such as your Rack email address, a Gmail address. It really doesn't matter. It can be any email address. Then the other thing you want to do is pay attention to whether or not you want a copy saved on your mail server under this email address that you're creating if you're doing a forward. In most cases, you don't want a copy saved because you don't want to exceed or build up or use resources unnecessarily. And in this case, if you're just trying to get the email forwarded to your email so that you can retrieve it, reply to it, and take care of it, it's not a good idea to save a copy. If I were sending it out to multiple people, you might want to save a copy so you have a reference point. You can come back and you can actually see what was going on. In this demo, I'm not going to forward it, so I'm just going to turn that off. Auto reply. In most cases, we'll set up an auto reply in our WordPress site or from our website itself and handle that through our code and not through the server. One of the places that this is very beneficial is there's a thing called domain parking, where you might buy a domain name and not want a website associated with it at this time. Hosting companies will allow you to keep the domain name on their server, and they'll actually give you a couple email addresses and things like that, some services, so that you can leverage the address without having a website. In this case, we would put in here something like, thanks for your email, period. I will get back to you within the next 48 hours. Another thing that you could do is in here, if you do have a domain name and you don't really want to maintain it, you could actually place in here, we are currently not monitoring this email address. Please contact us at blah, 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 blah. So it's just a way to communicate with people that try to contact you through this email address without having to constantly monitor the email, stay on top of it, or anything like that. For this demo, I'm not going to do an auto reply either. The size limit is essentially how much storage you want to allow this email to utilize on your server. In a lot of cases, you have limited space, so you want to divvy up that space and use it sparingly. And if you have a lot of employees and you're creating a lot of email addresses, you might consider bringing it down to 5 gig, 1 gig. It all is up to you. 10 is usually the default on this server, and it's a fair amount of email. So once we have this all filled out, we can go ahead and hit create. What happens is this dialog, this form that's inside this dialog, will reset itself so that you can enter another email address in case you're actually trying to enter several email addresses. We'll go ahead and we'll close out the dialog box. And we'll come down and we'll look for our new email address, which is right here. What we can do with this email address now is we can click on it and it will open up our information, so that if we were going to put it into our phone or something like that, we would actually, the mail server username, which is in your phone or in your mail application, your mail client, it'll ask for a username. That's your full email address that you created. The incoming and the outgoing server is always mail.egavashosting.com for both. Gives you the port numbers, and you should be able to set up a phone or any kind of mail client just using this information alone. In some cases, if you don't have access to a mail client, which would be somewhat odd, or you needed to, you were in a situation where all you had access to was the internet, you could log into your hosting, click on your email address, and click on this called Roundcube. What Roundcube does, it's a hosting client, and you can see it just gave us a login. Normally it'll automatically log you in, and this is a good indicator right after you set up an email address that the server has not completed the whole process of setting up the email address yet. So we'll come back and check it again in a minute, and I'll explain a couple other things to you about email. I'm going to go ahead and close the dialog box for the moment. You'll see under here we have a catch-all. What is catch-all? Catch-all essentially is, if you see the hand is here for Brian at rackreallife.com, you'll see it here for demo at rackreallife.com. What happens with the catch-all is if someone puts in an email address such as blah blah at rackreallife.com, and there is no other email address, there is no email address called blah blah at rackreallife.com, what happens is that email is forwarded to your catch-all, meaning that these people can, that these emails will make their way to you, irregardless of whether there is an available email address or not. Forwarding, we just looked at forwarding. You can see here in support, takes us to our forwarding, and you can see that our support Rack Real Life is actually forwarding to A Couture at Rack Real Life and B Savage at Rack Real Life. And you can actually get to your email forwardings by clicking this tab. We're going to go ahead and come up here and go back to our email accounts again. Spam. Essentially what spam does is it allows us to enable or disable spam protection. When we put on spam protection, we basically tell it what to do with emails that fall into the category of spam. There are times that this is very useful. If you write a bad form on your website and you use this email address, you'll find that you're getting spam quite a bit and getting some crazy mail. So you might come in and turn this on. Your blacklist. Essentially what the blacklist does is it checks your email to make sure that you weren't blacklisted. And in blacklisting, what happens is if you are a spammer and you get reported enough, what'll happen is you'll get reported to different agencies and you'll end up on this list called the blacklist. And They will do everything they can to shut your email down and not allow you to send emails and interrupt those emails that do make it out onto the internet. Auto configuration. This is for Outlook, Outlook Express email client. This one is for Thunderbird, Mozilla Thunderbird, which is on most Macs. This one is on Apple Mail client, which is on most Macs. If you click this, what happens is it actually downloads a file that you unzip and click on it, and it'll go ahead and set up your email address on that client. This is our size limits so that we can just monitor our size limit that we talked about. And this is our auto reply, so we can go ahead and manage that as well on the email address if we need to. And then last but least, change password. If you've forgotten your password, you can't get in, or a client has forgotten their password, you can come in here and set up a new password and then push that out to them. I think it's probably been long enough at this point, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit this email address again that we created, and we're going to see if it's set up on the server. As you can see, it put us into the client, which means that our email is working properly and it's ready to go. There are lots of great tutorials, video tutorials on how to set up an email filter, quick email controls, how to create a new email account, which I just went over with you. So I would encourage you to go ahead and
this tutorial will show you how to create a new email account.
Access them. They're great tutorials. And that will conclude our email address tutorial.